Back to Fantasy Football today, presented by Hooters. I'm Jamie. That's Dave. That's Heath. And then we have a special guest, Bryant McFadden.
I finally made it.
Two-time Super Bowl champion.
Made it to the big leagues.
How many fantasy championships? I just keep saying multiple.
Two.
Two?
Yes,
we'll
and counting.
exaggerate.
And counting.
Two and counting. You're going to take some from us this year, I understand,
No
right?
question.
No, he's not.
That's
Most
right.
definitely.
You're going to try. You're going to try. All right, Brian. So we have you on the set here for a couple reasons. One, you're part of our training camp tour. You're going to be going out to a few different stops.
Yep.
So we're going to talk to you about the Steelers, talk to you about the Jets, two of your upcoming trips. But we also want to pick the mind of one of the best defensive backs in NFL history. Yes, I will pump you up to that level.
That's a bit far-fetched, but I take it. Thank
We're
you.
going to talk to you about some of our breakout receivers.
Yes, sir.
That we're looking at for 2019. But let's start with the Steelers. Obviously, a team you're very familiar with. You spent a lot of time there. Antonio Brown, gone. I know you heard that.
Yep.
He's now with the Raiders. Juju Smith-Schuster now ascends to that #1 spot. But who is going to help replace Antonio Brown? Dante Moncrief, James Washington, Deontay Johnson. How do you see this receiving core breaking down in Pittsburgh?
Well, trying to replace Antonio Brown probably would never happen because he's that type of player. So I think multiple guys will get an opportunity to really show their worth, starting with Dante Moncrief. I pick him first, and most importantly because of the experience he has. When you look at what he's been able to do in his professional career, he may not blow you away with his numbers, but yet and still a year ago playing with inconsistent quarterback and Blake Bortles, he put up serviceable numbers. Now he's playing with the best quarterback he's ever lined up with. And yes, he has played with Andrew Luck, but I would take Big Ben over Andrew Luck right now if I had to pick a quarterback. A potential Hall of Famer. I believe he will have career-like numbers. And then secondly, behind Dante, I look at James Washington. There's a lot of pressure on James Washington. When you look at what the Steelers have been able to do as far as drafting wide receivers, third-round guys they have selected in past, they have all flourished to be big-time playmakers. Starting off with Hines Ward, and then you can go with the likes of Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders, now James Washington, and even Martavius Bryant. Remember, he was a third-round selection, but granted, he had some issues away from the football field, but when he was in the lineup, he was a big-time playmaker, so they're hoping that James Washington can emerge to be a quality pass catcher outside of Juju.
So, what a year last year for James Conner. Stepping in for Le'Veon Bell, finishes the #6 running back in PPR, and he did it in only 13 games. And there's been a little bit of talk about him losing some work, sharing some touches, getting in there with Jalen Samuels. What's your expectations for Conner, knowing the track record of Steelers running backs in fantasy?
I think he's going to have, once again, a big-time year when you look at the fantasy implications. Remember, last year, everybody was concerned about how high should they draft James, not knowing exactly when Le'Veon Bell would return. Week 1 against the Cleveland Browns blew everybody away with this fantasy production. I think when you look at what is surrounding him, yes, Antonio Brown is no longer in that lineup, but that offensive line, not just one of the best offensive lines in the AFC North, they're a top 5 unit in the entire NFL. And because of that, you have to like his chances as far as being able to really do some good things running the football. And oh, by the way, he's a quality pass catcher outside of the backfield as well. So playing behind that offensive line, knowing Big Ben is still the quarterback playing some top level play, I like James Conner. And granted, if they decide to really decrease the workload a little bit, I don't think it should affect his numbers.
Before we move on to the Jets, I want to ask you real quick, do you think Roethlisberger takes a huge dip in production, losing Brown, losing Jesse James as well, but I mean, losing the key playmaker there at the receiver spot?
He put up unbelievable numbers, like Drew Brees-ish numbers. I'm not quite ready to say he would repeat the numbers, but if he took a step back in the wrong direction as far as statistics, based on how well he played last year, that still would be lights out. And I think any fantasy owner would take that. Most importantly for Ben, just staying healthy and being smart with the football, because sometimes he tends to force the issues, and that create turnovers.
There you go, Heath. Your Ben Roethlisberger love, supported by a man who knows the Steelers very well.
Right.
The Jets taking one of the. Don't leave him hanging.
You treated me like Kawhi.
The Jets took one of the Steelers players, Le'Veon Bell, now going to New York. How do you think that's all going to work out? He was clearly benefited by that offensive line you talked about. Benefited from a Hall of Fame quarterback, studs on the outside at the receiver spot. He has none of that going to the Jets. So how do you think Bell will do now with his new team?
I think it's going to take some time. Remember in 2017 when he missed all of training camp, it took some time for him to get into rhythm, and we didn't see the production that we thought we would see based on how well he played in 2016. I think this is the same circumstances as far as being away from the game. And oh, by the way, he's playing with a new team, a new cast of members surrounding him, philosophy, game plan, things like that. So I don't expect to see Le'Veon Bell just blow you away week 1 and week 2 with his production, but eventually when he gets into football shape, when he gets accustomed to the new scheme and philosophies there in New York, you better believe I think he's going to be a top-tier player.
Sam Darnold had an up and down rookie year. He's on the same team, but it's kind of like a new team. Yep. Adam Gase, new head coach, new offensive system to learn. He's got Le'Veon Bell, added Jamison Crowder. What do you expect from Darnold in the second year?
Well, based on the personnel, the revamped personnel they have surrounding Sam Darnold, I believe he should be in shape to do nice things. And here's why. Outside the personnel additions, Jamison Crowder, Le'Veon Bell, getting Osemele on the offensive line, you look at how he finished 2018. His last 4 ball games, guys, he played some of his best football. He averaged roughly around 230 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And based on what we saw him do when he was at USC, decision making, that ability was a bit inconsistent, and we saw that from time to time. He blew us away week 1 against Detroit. Remember that Monday night game? Everybody was like, wow, he's a top fantasy getter. And then everybody started to put him in his lineup, and he kind of was a disappointment. I think how he finished last year gives me reason to feel excited about what he could do in the beginning of 2019, especially when you have nice players surrounding you like Le'Veon Bell and Jamison Crowder.
And don't forget about what should be #1 receiver,
your guy,
Robbie Anderson. One of my guys. Yeah, I think part of the reason why those 4 games was Anderson. They finally connected. The rapport wasn't really there in the early part of the season. 3 of those 4 games, he hit 17 or more PPR points. So Anderson, for me, is a breakout candidate. We're going to talk breakout wide receivers. But before we get there, just give me your thoughts on Robbie Anderson as a guy that seems to be developing not only on the field but off the field. He had some off-the-field problems the last couple of seasons. He said, I didn't take any vacations this offseason because I didn't earn it. Yeah. So now he's trying to get that contract. He's trying to show that he could be a #1 guy. Can he live up to that expectation?
Yeah, I think so. Look at the top 4 guys right now. I mean, collectively as a unit, one would say the Jets could have the best wide receiver core in the AFC East.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially. Now, they don't have the star power like the Patriots, but, collectively as a unit, Anderson, you got Crowder, you got Josh, you got Quincy. These are all real nice components. The issue with some of these guys staying healthy, and I think that's a big factor for Robbie. But having Jamison Crowder, he's one of the best slot wide receivers in the game that no one really talks about because of his ability to be a big-time sure catcher and also yards after the catch. That can really open up opportunities for Robbie and Quincy on the perimeter. And also another reason why I really love Robbie, Jamie, he's an explosive wide receiver. I mean, his ability to take the top off the coverage, it can happen at any given time. And I think they will be more aggressive taking shots down the football field. And that's the case. He's the guy you got to target.
Yeah, the one thing I think, and I know this is your argument, Heath, is that Adam Gase, coming from his background in Miami, using the slot receiver, which would help Jamison Crowder. Yep. But I also think you're going to see Robbie Anderson move around the formation a little bit. That will help him as well. It's one of the reasons why I like him. Again, I just think the rapport that you started to see at the end of last season, as we move now to our breakout receivers for 2019, Anderson is one of my guys. I think you could take him in that round 5 range. You don't necessarily have to reach for him. His ADP is almost round 6 or round 7 in a lot of cases, but I just think that the upside is there for him given this role for the Jets, as well as Chris Godwin. We've talked about him a lot this offseason. Bruce Arians comes out and says 100 catches for him, but pump the brakes on that. I just think, though, the slot receiver for Arians, you've seen it over history. He had Reggie Wayne for the Colts. He had Larry Fitzgerald. He did it a little bit with Hines Ward at the end of his career. I think Godwin's really going to benefit, plus the fact that you lose all those targets with Adam Humphries and Deshaun Jackson gone. As much as I like O.J. Howard to have a breakout performance as well, I think Godwin is the one that takes the big leap. Year 3 for him. So these are 2 guys that I'm trying to get on a lot of my fantasy rosters, and hopefully they will live up to the expectations of being a breakout. So we teased it at the beginning of the end of last segment. You and me, B-Mac, we're on the same page with this guy for the Packers.
Oh, no question.
Tell us about your breakouts.
I love Geronimo Allison first and foremost because look at who the quarterback is. I mean, you talk about Aaron Rodgers. He's still a bad man. I mean, he's the people's champ. He's playing still top-tier football at the quarterback position. And Geronimo would have been a breakout player a year ago if he was healthy. I mean, his first 4 ball game, guys, he was, 19 receptions, 289 yards, 2 touchdowns, only on 29 targets. He was on pace, if he played a full season in 2018, 70-plus receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That would have been a breakout year. Most importantly, no Randall Cobb, so clearly he's a second option behind Davante Adams, who will receive a lot of attention. So I believe if he is healthy, guys, you better believe he will put up nice numbers because look who his quarterback is.
And he's embracing it. He said yesterday, I'm the slot guy.
Yeah.
And so he's looking at it as his role there. Before we move on, though, Cortland Sutton, what do you like about him?
Big target. I mean, 6'3", around 218, 220. I love his skill set, and outside of his attributes, look at the opportunities. Emmanuel Sanders returning to action from an Achilles injury. How soon will he be as far as 100%? And then outside of Emmanuel Sanders, you got Deshaun Hamilton. I mean, right now, on paper, Cortland Sutton is probably the #1 guy with an experienced, healthy quarterback in Joe Flacco. That should definitely help his development. And he did some pretty good things, 42 receptions on 84 targets, roughly over 700 yards, 4 touchdowns, and they had bad quarterback play
really
in Denver. I understand people might not believe in Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco is 10 times better than what they had a year ago.
And he likes to target those receivers down the field.
Exactly.
He's not a dinker and a dunker like Case Keenum is.
Yes.
Sorry, Washington fans, you're going to see that this year. My 2 breakouts, let's start in San Francisco with Dante Pettis. Last year, loved the way that he finished in his last 5 games. 4 touchdowns, almost 400 yards, over 6 targets per game, and it was without Jimmy Garoppolo. 2 of my favorite things about Dante Pettis, number 1, 3 of his 5 touchdowns on the year were in the red zone, so he's not just a big play threat. And more than 60% of his routes run were out wide. So he can work in the slot, he can work out wide. They didn't really do a great job of trying to find another #1 receiver to come in. They drafted Deebo Samuel. I think he's good. I think Dante Pettis will be a lot better. I don't mind getting him as soon as round 6 on draft day. And the same thing for Christian Kirk in Arizona. He is a great fit for this offense.
Captain Kirk.
I think he's going to. I think he's the best receiver in Arizona, and I know that sounds
Wait a
crazy
minute.
when you think about Larry Fitzgerald,
Yes.
but he is the best fit for this offense as it stands right now. He's faster than Larry. He's just as good of a route runner. He doesn't have as good of hands, but he's still got really good hands, and he's got a good track record working with Kyler Murray. They were teammates back at Texas A&M back in the day. So Christian Kirk is someone that I expect a breakout year from.
You ready to put that on paper? He's the best wide receiver in Arizona.
He is
right
the
now.
best fit for Arizona's offense right now.
I think he's the best fantasy receiver, but I'm going to disagree with you. Larry Fitzgerald is still a better route runner. I don't care. He could be 100 years old. He's going to run better routes than Christian Kirk. Who are your breakouts this year?
My 2 are Tyler Lockett and DJ Moore. Tyler Lockett had his breakout last year. This guy has been so efficient over his career. Caught 70% of the passes thrown his way, averaged 10 yards per target, and last year took it to a whole new level, 81.4% catch rate. But the way he breaks out this year is volume. You look at the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, Russell Wilson, his #1 receiver, gets about 22% of the targets in the offense. There's no question Tyler Lockett's the #1 receiver. He's the only wide receiver that we know is any good for sure. So I expect him to get up to close to 100 targets, over 1,000 yards for the first time in his career, still score at a high rate. And then DJ Moore, I was really impressed with the 21-year-old rookie, 788 yards, and got off to a very slow start. You look at his last 7 games, he's on a 1,100-yard pace. I expect Cam Newton to be even better in his second year in this system. Moore could be a top 20 wide receiver.
I love all these guys. I mean, I think it's going to be fun for the wide receivers. It's almost like, how do you decide where you're going to go on draft day? Do you go one of the studs early? Do you wait and get some of these guys with the mid-round picks? It's just going to be a fun position to pick apart for your fantasy drafts, and certainly a lot more breakouts that we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this draft prep season.